Good morning, everyone. This was a very, very appropriate hymn to begin with, because Shankaracharya, we know, is the embodiment of the path of knowledge, the greatest exponent of the impersonal absolute Brahman, and yet he writes this beautiful hymn to the Divine Mother. O Mother, thou art our only refuge, our only goal in life. So we see in the life of Shankaracharya also this blend of knowledge and devotion. This brings us to the topic today. This talk is entitled The Two Wings of the Bird, and it's based on a statement that Swami Vivekananda makes in his Bhakti Yoga. He says, 3 things are necessary for a bird to fly: the 2 wings and the tail as a rudder for steering. Jnana, knowledge, is 1 wing. Bhakti, love, is the other. And yoga, or meditation, is the tail that keeps up the balance. So we have this beautiful illustration. We can imagine a bird with only 1 wing. And not only can it fly, it can't get off the ground. That the mere possibility of flying is not there unless both wings are functioning. And with both wings, it can soar through the sky and go wherever it wants. So this really indicates an absolute necessity for both. Now, we may say that, of course, there are some who are strictly jnanis, some who are strictly bhaktas, and true. But for Swamiji, this is a different type of ideal. We can say a new type of ideal, based, of course, on the life and teachings and experience of Sri Ramakrishna. How he was able to blend the path of knowledge and the path of devotion. Even the idea of the bird as a soul is one of the earliest and most beautiful examples that we have of the possibility of absolute freedom. How free the bird is when it can fly and go wherever it likes, to defy that one thing, gravity, which is the force that seems to be impossible to defy. How throughout history, human beings, before they invented the airplane, were trying to figure out some way to fly like the birds. So Sri Ramakrishna gives that example that just as a bird released from a cage can soar through the heavens, that this is the feeling that one gets when the soul, the mind is soaring in the infinite absolute reality. And then he uses the image of the bird in so many different ways. We have beautiful Mundaka Upanishad of the 2 birds on the tree, the upper bird being so majestic and just looking without any attachment, without any desire. And even the idea of this Kundalini, like the bird hopping from one branch to another branch to another branch and getting to the top of the tree. So there's so many illustrations using the bird on the mast of the ship, the many, many illustrations that we have, and giving us this feeling of what it would be like to be free from the limitations of the body and the mind. So it's a very nice type of meditation, even, to imagine the soul soaring in the heavens. Have you ever seen sights of this? I have 2 examples that come to mind. There's a place in St. Louis that you can go that is famous for eagle sighting. And you see them, how they soar all over. Second thing is when I was in Japan one time, and you see constantly these hawks, huge hawks, just soaring, not even using their wings, just soaring. And you just get that feeling of what it would be like to just soar in the infinite absolute reality. So this idea of the bird is something very, very special. People even have dreams, flying dreams, that how we feel if we could have the freedom from this earth, the pull of the earth, the gravity, worldliness, the dumbness and everything, to be able to soar like a bird. If we think of the first really type of ecstasy that Sri Ramakrishna had, he was a young boy, 6 or 7 years old, walking along the paddy field. We know sometimes in the rainy season, just without any warning, the sky will start to get black. You'll know that the rains are coming. It will just turn black middle of the day. And he saw these white cranes flying. And that contrast between the white cranes and the black-colored sky sent him into some ecstatic mood. And he lost outer consciousness. He fell as if he had fainted, and they had to carry him home. And later he just described it as a feeling of indescribable joy. No explanation given, but I have this feeling that he felt his own soul flying and soaring in the absolute like the birds that he saw. So we have so many nice illustrations using this idea of the soul being in the cage of the body and wants to free itself like the bird. But the special distinction of Swamiji's example is how he unites these two different paths, the path of knowledge and the path of devotion. And the reason why this is so remarkable is that there's always been a kind of tradition, almost a prejudice, that we choose one or the other, or those who are very devotional, they'll praise the path of devotion, they'll look down on the path of knowledge, and vice versa. So this has been kind of a struggle and a point of contention throughout the ages between two different types of people and two different spiritual paths, two different worldviews, two different philosophies, and each will have its own idea of the other. So for the devotee, the jnani is intellectual and a little bit dry. Dry and intellectual, that everything is impersonal, absolute. Where's the love? Where's the joy? Where's the relationship? Where's the communion and feeling of union with God? That a little bit selfish, just striving for one's own individual God realization. This will be the stereotype that the devotee will have for the followers of the path of knowledge. And on the other hand, for the bhaktas, jnani will think they're highly emotional, perhaps irrational, perhaps fanatical, that they have to see God in terms of some human type of relationship, that they want to achieve this type of union and maintain a sense of individuality and separation, which they will say is remaining within Maya. So there's a little bit of a gap between them, and really I feel one of the purposes of the advent of Sri Ramakrishna was to get rid of this distinction and to show how they can really be beautifully harmonized, which is the whole point of Swamiji's statement. So these are all stereotypes, they're oversimplifications, but there's a little bit of truth for all of these. So it's not surprising that even for us, many of us, that we'll have a little bit of a difficulty in trying to harmonize the two. We'll feel we belong to one or we belong to the other. Now, this is also one of the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. He uses a very nice symbolic language that we're either born with the nature of Shiva or the nature of Vishnu. Those who are born with a bit of this Vishnu nature, they'll become devotees. Those who were born with a bit of the Shiva nature, they'll become jnanis. But at the same time, he teaches this, what we call Jnana Mishra or Jnana Mishrita Bhakti, this union, this joining of the path of knowledge and the path of devotion, both. So we know that we may have a strong desire for one side or a strong desire for the other side. This is true. But the more we can blend, the better. Swamiji says, it is not given to all of us to be harmonious in the building up of our character in this life, yet we know that that character is of the noblest type in which all these three, knowledge and love and yoga, are harmoniously fused. So Swamiji was a great proponent of not practicing all of the yogas, not combining them, not even a type of harmony of the yogas, but one yoga that integrates all of them. He felt that this was the strongest type of spiritual attitude, life, practice that we can have, so that when we're in a devotional mood, we can practice the path of devotion. When we sit for meditation, we can all be Raja Yogis. And when we act, we can all be karmis. So a beautiful way of utilizing all aspects of the human personality and giving full rein to all of them and turning them all into something helpful in spiritual life. Now, why is there no mention of karma yoga? You must have noticed, 2 wings and a tail, right? It's only 3. My feeling is that when we analyze karma yoga, it'll either fall within jnana yoga or bhakti yoga. For the jnani, this karma yoga means acting without any attachment or acting without the feeling of agency. I'm not the doer, this idea. And for the bhakta, karma yoga means I do everything as an offering. Everything I do is offered to my chosen ideal, whatever form that is. So this karma yoga really means putting into practice jnana yoga and bhakti yoga. So that'll be included. So it's really harmony of all the 4 yogas, we can say. One way we can understand the need to harmonize both is by looking at the, I would say, disadvantage or the difficulties that there are in practicing only one spiritual path. If we're stuck that we're only jnanis or we're only bhaktas, then there's a certain danger to each one of these. And on the other hand, when we combine these, and especially after we have some type of experience, of course, for those God-realized souls, there's no question about that, we realize that the distinction kind of disappears. To know God and to love God are one. This is something that Sri Ramakrishna always emphasized. So I'll get to that in a little bit, the pluses and negatives of each spiritual path. One of the reasons why we find such a distinction between these 2 paths is a historical type of reason. That if we look at the early Upanishadic period, we find that there's no real personal God. There's no worship of personal God in the Upanishads. We have this Saguna Brahman is not really the same Bhagavan that we'll get later in the devotional schools. The Saguna Brahman is only, of the Upanishads, is that same Brahman with his power to create this universe. So not something that one will shed tears over and call upon and want to devote one's life to. We don't find that in during the Upanishadic period. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I don't know if it's absolutely true or not, but this is according to scholars, Western scholars, and I like this idea very much, that what we call this Upanishadic period and this belief in this impersonal absolute and this Tattvamasi, all of that, was reserved for a very small handful of people. The Brahmins at that time kept all of this to themselves, so it'll be a handful of Brahmin boys who are going to the forest with these gurus, or later those who become sannyasins and go off to the mountain cave and all of that. But at the same time, what did the other people do? The vast majority, even today, does anybody know the percentage of Brahmins there are in India? It's very small. I forget, it was 3% or something. I may be wrong on that. Somebody can check. But very, how much? 10%. So it's a very small percentage. Yeah, 10%. So the vast majority of the people in India, according to the scholars at least, had an oral tradition that was a fully devotional tradition. They call it the Bhagavata tradition. Not Bhagavata Purana, but just Bhagavata, meaning the worship of the personal God in the form of Krishna, mostly, at that time. And we don't know much about it because these are the people that didn't learn to read and write, the simple people, but they had this tradition, and there was kind of invisible wall between the two. Even if we don't accept that, we can say that the later tradition, the Puranic tradition, or tradition of Gita, that there'll be those that will drift to that side and won't care much for the Soham. They won't care much for this Tattvamasi of the Jnanis. So there'll be this little wedge between the two, and one is considered to be for the elite, the Jnanis, and even this Jnana Yoga traditionally was for sannyasins. It was for those who could renounce everything, and for householders it was Bhakti Yoga. So these were old traditional beliefs that made sense at that time, and yet we can see that they were restricted and limited, that we can go beyond the limitations of these different views. When we get to Gita, now we're getting to this harmony. Now we're seeing side by side all of the 4 different yogas. It may still not reach that point of perfect harmony, because Arjuna will keep asking the question, who is greater, the jnani or the bhakta? Which is the better path to follow? Path of sannyasa or the householder? So that distinction is still there. And we'll find that Sri Krishna, he'll recommend one during that discussion of Jnana Yoga. He'll recommend bhakti during discussion of bhakti yoga. That we don't get any very, very clear answer. But I think the most reliable answer comes in chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, the very popular chapter. Many of the kids, our summer camp kids and everything, they memorize this is chapter 12. In my mission, recommends that very much. And here, Arjuna is asking Sri Krishna that which is a better path to follow? The path of the impersonal absolute reality, or worshipping God as a personal God that we can relate to, that we can pray to, and all of that. And Sri Krishna, he'll say, both are good. You can realize God through either one, have the highest type of realization. But he goes on to praise Bhakti Yoga. He goes on to praise Bhakti Yoga as being better for most people, more suitable for most people. And again, this will be a very traditional idea, that this Jnana Yoga is reserved for a very small number of people. Exclusive Jnana Yoga. The whole point of this is that we need both. If we're going to try to fly on one wing, and we want to use this Jnana Yoga, then we have to be very unusual, special people. Same thing with Bhakti Yoga. So we find that even in Gita, there's a little bit of a distinction, but not so important. That now we're seeing that we can follow these and combine them to a certain extent. And later we'll get these Jnana Yoga teachers who are also bhaktas. We'll get something like that. There's a section in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna where somebody says to Sri Ramakrishna that this is a new thing that you're teaching, that there's a devotion for those who are also jnanis, something like that. And he says, how is that? There's nothing new. And he points to the Adhyatma Ramayana and other things. And we find that there are early teachers. There's Madhusudana Saraswati, Sridhara Swami. There were others that were non-dualists, we can say, at the same time, had a very devotional, full devotional life. And if we want to really go back, we can go back to Shankaracharya himself. And that's why I say this hymn was so appropriate, that he also wrote many hymns to the gods and goddesses and had that devotional aspect to his life as well. But for me, Sri Ramakrishna himself is really the one who takes this to the highest level, and all of the teachings of Swamiji go right back to Sri Ramakrishna. When Swamiji makes a statement like that, we know that this is exactly what he learned from Sri Ramakrishna. And Thakur, he used to say that he's not teaching anything new, that everything the words that come out of his mouth are all the ancient truths from the rishis. But at the same time, he was very original in his thinking. And every once in a while, he'll make a statement like, the experiences of this place go beyond the Vedas and Vedanta. So this union of Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, the idea of the Vijnani, certain other things that we can say are more or less original. This idea of seeing God everywhere and seeing everything as a manifestation of God, seeing God dwelling within all the beings as being the result of God realization. This is the state of the Vijnani. We don't read about this so much, the idea of the avatar and Ishvara Kotis. So he did make some, I think, really original contributions, but one of these is how this beautiful blend of knowledge and devotion. Even if we look at his first experience of God realization, we can say at Dakshineshwar, the Dakshineshwar temple garden. Was it a devotional feeling of oneness, of union with the Divine Mother, or was it merging in that infinite absolute? Very, very hard to say. We all know the story. He's about to take his life. He's in such a state of longing for a realization of Mother, and such a feeling of anguish that he says, Mother, reveal yourself to me or I'll cut my throat with a knife. And there's a knife hanging there that they use for Balidan. So then he falls unconscious, and he has, as he says, wave after wave of consciousness and bliss and joy engulfed me, and I lost all awareness of the outer world and merged in that ocean. And then when he comes back to normal consciousness later, he's repeating, Ma, 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 Mother, Mother, Mother. And what do we say? Was he having the experience of communion with the Divine Mother? Was he merged in the infinite absolute reality? Or is it something indescribable that we can only guess at? In that level, that realm that he entered, there's no distinction between this personal God, impersonal absolute, and whether it's knowledge or whether it's a devotion. Everything seems to merge in that state. This is why he so often said that the experiences that take place in that state cannot be expressed. One cannot say what that ultimate reality is with these words in speech. It goes beyond all of that. So we see in his life that all of the dualistic, so-called dualistic sadhanas, all of the spiritual practices that involved the worship of God in a personal form, that involved looking upon himself as a spiritual seeker, all ended in oneness. Even the most dualistic type of attitudes and relationships, thinking himself to be like Hanuman, is hopping from place to place in order to feel that he's the servant of Rama. All of the different spiritual paths, when he would reach that ultimate state, it would end in merging and oneness. So he would say both path of knowledge and the path of devotion end in oneness. Now the jnani will explain it one way, the devotee may explain it another way, state of union, as opposed to a state of identity, but still this merging and absolute oneness for Sri Ramakrishna was the end of all the different spiritual practices. Then ultimately he practiced the path of Advaita Vedanta under Totapuri. And here, without the help of a relationship, see, the path of devotion involves a relationship, bhava. Ramakrishna, he emphasized this so much, that we have to look upon, if we look upon God in a certain way, we have to look upon ourselves in a certain way and have a relationship and an attitude. We want to worship God as Mother, we have to think of ourselves as children. It's a very logical type of thing. But this Advaita Vedanta, this path of Vedanta under Totapuri, There was no help with the relationship. There was no spiritual attitude there. There was no ritual. There was no object of meditation. As soon as that picture of Mother Kali would come before his mind, he would have to try to transcend that. Ultimately, he said, I took knowledge like a sword and cut it right through Mother Kali, and then merged in that infinite absolute reality. So, from the very first day that he made this attempt, he entered into that state strictly through this path of Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga. There's kind of both, with this philosophical idea of oneness and the practice of meditation. So he realized the highest, and now he was really able to say that whether one follows a devotional path or there's a path of knowledge and path of meditation, that they end in the same place, whether it's through ecstatic love of God or the bliss of self-realization, that these are both. They both have that same source, Satchidananda, that infinite absolute reality. So this is what we call this Jnana Mishra or Mishrita Bhakti. Sri Ramakrishna himself wasn't so fond of this term. There's one place in the Gospel where he says, no, the Shuddha Bhakti is the real thing, that there'll be some devotees, they don't want it mixed with jnana at all. But mostly he'll say, you want to love God, you have to know God also. And the Shuddha Bhakti is really more the selfless love of God, not so much that antagonistic feeling towards the path of knowledge. But at the same time, if we say that he understood that both can equally take us to the same place, there's no ultimate distinction, why did he also, just as Sri Krishna did in the Gita, why did he also emphasize the path of devotion? Because he did. There's no question about that. Bhakti Ishar, he used to say, devotion alone is the one essential thing. And he would say, in this present age, this Kali Yuga, the path of devotion is the best for most people. So why did he do that if he understood that equally the jnani, the bhakta, they can all realize the same goal, that there's no antagonism between them? He did this because he saw that there are advantages and disadvantages to each, and that for most of us, this adhikara, this qualification for the path of jnana yoga is a little bit too high for us, and also not helpful. This is one of the great teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, was that the path that we choose, that it should be something that appeals to us, it should be something we can digest. We may love this path of knowledge, and at the same time, it won't be good for us. It won't, like food that tastes good, but it's not very healthy for us. Or the other way around, both are possible. But there are certain advantages to the path of devotion and certain disadvantages to the path of knowledge, and vice versa. And vice versa, both ways. Path of devotion is considered to be a natural and easy path. Shahod Shoja. Thakur uses these terms. Why natural? Because it allows us to utilize the human emotions that we have and the human relationships that we have. We all know what it means to love someone. We all know what it means to have a mother, a father, many of us, a child, a brother, a sister, and the closeness and the love that comes through that type of relationship. So this is a very natural thing, that we get to utilize these human emotions that we have. Then there's a path of devotion. It's easy in the sense that it's like climbing, if we want to climb a mountain, that we can either go straight up, and it's the shortest path, but the most difficult path. Yeah. It's like going around this winding route that we may hardly know that we're walking uphill, and at the same time that we'll get to the top of the mountain. So it's considered to be a natural, easy type of ascent rather than the steep ascent that the real mountain climbers will have to do. So we use our emotions, no need to try to still all of these yearnings of the heart, no need to try to make ourselves superhuman, that we can start with all of our failures and frailties. The very nice thing, it says, adhikara, who is qualified for the path of devotion? Everybody, if we're sincere. If we're sincere, if we lead a good, clean, moral type of life, then it doesn't matter. We may start with what we can say is a type of ignorance. We may start with this idea that God is somewhere far off, that I'm a sinner. We can start out with any of these ideas, and gradually we get closer and closer. And Swamiji says, love becomes a cord that is tying us to God. We get closer and closer, and we start to have a better understanding of that relationship and who we are. Path of knowledge, we have to start at the very beginning with the ultimate truth that we'll find at the end. No compromise. If it's true that I'm one with that reality, then forget about this nonsense of having a relationship with God. We don't have a relationship with that, which is our very own self. We are that. So this will be the attitude that the jnani will take. The jnani has to get rid of all ideas of individuality, of separateness and everything, and the bhakta can start with all of these false attachments and everything, and little by little leave them behind and progress higher, higher, and higher. So the path of love, as we get closer and closer to the ultimate goal, that we start to experience ourselves also in a different way. See, look at Hanuman. The beginning, yes, I'm the servant of Rama. And then he feels I'm a part of Rama. Then he says, yes, that I can reach a point where I understand that we're one and the same. So this is that path that we take with Jnana Yoga, with Bhakti Yoga. Now, Swamiji is very clear about the other side of the story. He says, the one great advantage of Bhakti is that it is the easiest and the most natural way to reach the great divine end in view. Its great disadvantage is that in its lower forms, it oftentimes degenerates into hideous fanaticism. The singleness of attachment to a loved object, without which no genuine love can grow, is very often also the cause of the denunciation of everything else. Yeah, we love our own ideal by hating somebody else's ideal. This is human nature. All the weak and undeveloped minds in every religion or country have only one way of loving their ideal, that is, by hating every other ideal. Herein is the explanation of why the same man who was so lovingly attached to his own ideal of God, so devoted to his own ideal of religion, becomes a howling fanatic as soon as he sees or hears anything of any other ideal. This is the extreme. If we're looking for something very, very negative. Then Swamiji makes a very nice statement. He says that the fanatic is like the dog guarding its master's house. Only the watchdog is more intelligent. It'll recognize its master in any guise. So we somehow have this idea that people are worshiping a different God. They're all one and the same. Second disadvantage is that the rituals and all of the things that are aids to progress in spiritual life for the devotee somehow become the end instead of the means. And that attachment comes to all the different types of ritual and ceremonies and rites and dress and even marks on the body, all sorts of things become more important than the ultimate goal. Again, Swamiji says, it is necessary to remember that forms and ceremonials, though absolutely necessary for the progressive soul, have no other value than taking us to that state in which we feel the most intense love to God. Now, what about Jnana Yoga? What are the advantages to that? It's direct. There's no compromise. That we don't have to start out with any false idea of ourselves. If I know that this is the truth, then I start with that truth. If I know that this ego is something unreal, then I don't fool around with it and say, well, let me pretend I'm this, pretend that I'm that. And I just say no, that this is unreal, that the real nature of the self is one with this infinite absolute reality. We start with that, we stick with that from the very beginning through the very end. As I say, no compromise, and just this intense longing to realize the real nature of the self. Who am I? So this is that path of knowledge, that it begins with the truth, it ends with the truth. No compromise. See, we have a dilemma in spiritual life. That's Ramakrishna, he presented so very clearly that the jnani will say that this ego is ultimately unreal. And the bhakta will say that, yes, Sri Ramakrishna will say, yes, but no one can get rid of the ego. So this is a dilemma. Both are true. We can say, how is it possible, if something is not real, that it's impossible to get rid of? But this is the sad fact of life, because it's such a deep-seated, deep-rooted idea that we have within us. So this is the advantage of Jnana Yoga, is that there's no compromise. Now, disadvantage is that it's very difficult to maintain this feeling of oneness. It's very difficult to keep telling ourselves that I am Shiva, when the mind keeps going back to the body idea. And even this Totapuri, how such a God-realized soul can get so annoyed when Hriday comes and wants to use his sacred fire, Dhuni fire, to light his tobacco. And how Sri Ramakrishna laughs. Just now you're talking about the one with reality beyond everything, that the self is no ups and downs, this and that, and then you get angry at that. So it's very difficult to maintain that. We have to deny every natural instinct and attitude that we have. We have to have tremendous renunciation, dispassion, no desire to have a family life or anything like that. These are all considered to be almost absolutes if we want to strictly follow this path of Jnana Yoga. Constantly discriminate what is real, what is unreal, and constantly tell ourselves that I am the witness. I'm not this mind, I'm not the body, I'm not the senses. Shiva Hom Shiva Hom, the other great song of Shankaracharya, he had both of these moods. So when Sri Krishna replies to Arjuna, and he says that the path of knowledge is more difficult, he says for certain people, dehavat. The dehavat means somebody possessing a body. So who doesn't possess a body? That's everybody. This can be taken in two senses. One is those who have extreme body consciousness, or those who are identified with a body. And the other one is for everybody. Now, that's a little too much, because Sri Krishna is saying that, yes, some can follow this path of knowledge. So we can take this as meaning of those who are more identified with the body. Body always means the subtle body as well. So those who have the strong identification with their personality, with this lower ego, with all of the details of their life, what country they're from, what their profession was, what their religion is, what their politics are, all of that, some strong sense of identification. It makes it very difficult to follow this path of Jnana Yoga. So in some sense, I think that both are true. That dehavat means those who are attached to the body, but everybody is. Everybody is. So that doesn't mean that it's impossible. This means that this is to follow this path of knowledge. It takes great strength of mind. So this is the main thing, great strength of mind, and a natural type of vairagya, natural feeling of dispassion for the world, and natural longing for knowledge of the self. So Sri Ramakrishna, his solution is that both these paths are good, they should be combined, that it's equally true that you look for this ego and you won't find it. There's no substance to it. That's equally true. to this idea that one cannot get rid of this ego, that we have to accept that fact. So we have this metaphysical truth that the ego is nothing of any substance, and yet the fact is that we can't get rid of it. We get rid of it in that state of samadhi or the state of sleep and the awakening state. We have some sense of the ego. So what does Ramakrishna say? Don't discard this ultimate truth. Stick it in your pocket. Tie it in the corner of your cloth. And then go about and do your business. So that means that, yes, I know that ultimately I'm one with that ultimate reality, and yet it's not something that I can use as a practical tool at this stage of my life. So now I can accept this reality or the fact of this feeling of ego and have that type of relationship with God that will be very helpful. So I can adopt this idea that I'm a devotee, I'm a child, whatever it is, that to have that type of relationship with God. So it all goes back to this sense of I, this ego sense, that whether it's something real or unreal, it's something very hard to get rid of. So Thakur, he says, that you try to find it, you won't find it. And then you look the other way and it sneaks in. It comes right back, this feeling of I. This feeling of I identified with this lower type of self. So the teachings that Sri Ramakrishna gives with regard to the role of this ego and how it functioned with these different paths is something very, very subtle and very, very helpful, I think, in spiritual life. One of the examples that he gives, a very common example for him, is he says, picture a vast body of water and picture a stick lying on the surface of the water. Now, we know if you put a stick on the surface of the water, it's not separating one side from the other. But if you're looking from above, you look down, it looks like it can separate them. You know, if you go to a swimming pool, there'll be a deep end and a shallow end for the little kids. And they'll put a little string across with something to keep it floating and everything. So it looks like it's separating one side from the other. But you can swim right underneath it. It doesn't separate it at all. So he says this ego gives us this feeling of separation so that we feel we're separate from everybody else and that we're separate from God. And at the same time, we know that this ego, this stick, doesn't have the power to really create any distinction, that it's an apparent distinction, that there's no real separation. So both are true. I mentioned many times this statement that Swami Paramahansa made one time, that he said that the type of spiritual practice that we do in our order, according to Sri Ramakrishna, is that we're Advaitavadins, that we understand that this oneness is the ultimate truth, that this ego is something insubstantial, that really there's only this one ocean of consciousness, but we're Dvaitakaras, that when it comes to practical action and spiritual practice, that we utilize the teachings of the dualists, have a relationship with God. No distinction. We recognize the appearance of separation by the stick, and yet we know that there's no ultimate separation. So a very beautiful way of trying to understand this, and it allows us to be dualistic in our spiritual practice. Yes, I'm a child of God. And at the same time, in our deeper understanding, to know that this ego, when this ego will disappear, then there'll be oneness. But that for us, that may be the best way to attain to that. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives another very nice example of how we can, this relationship between the impersonal and the personal, God with form, God without form. He says they're very cold places where the water gets so cold that it'll form into blocks of ice. And these blocks of ice will remain with a particular shape and a particular form, but it's not different from the water. If you analyze it, there's no distinction between the block of ice and the water. And he says that the cooling power of devotion, Him Shakti, can take this ocean of Satchidananda and make it form into a block of ice according to the desire of the heart, how we want to worship God, to form that. And when the sun of knowledge comes, it'll melt right back into that ocean and be one with the ocean again. Form and formless, both one and the same. We can, so while we're worshiping that block of ice, we know that this is also infinite absolute. There's also nothing but water itself. Now, Thakur gives another illustration with water. He says, picture a pond that people go to take water for bathing and drinking and cooking. And there'll be different bathing ghats, different areas. There'll be steps you can walk down. And he says in some villages, there'll be different communities there, that the Hindus will go down one side, they'll have a pitcher, and they'll take the water from the lake, the reservoir pond, and they'll call it Jal. And Muslims will go through the other side. They have a little sack that they use to fill the water with, and they'll call it Pani. Then Christians, they'll come from the other side. They'll have a bucket, they'll fill it with that, they'll call it water. Now, he says that, do we not know that they're all one and the same substance? All one and the same substance. We take this as Thakur's example of how everyone is worshiping God with different names and forms. Yeah. But the other way of looking at it is that, what is the nature of water? Does water have form or no form? One time, M asked Ramakrishna, what is the nature of the Brahman? Usually Thakur says, one cannot say, mukhe bole jaina, one cannot say in words. Well, there's one time he says it's like water. So this is the question, what is the nature of water? Is it formless or does it have form? Now we know, classic definition is that it takes the shape of its container. As a liquid, it takes the shape of its container. That means that in the bucket it has one form, in the pitcher it has one form, in the sack it has one form, and yet water itself is formless. It doesn't have any form of its own. It's always based on the container that it's in. You say, well, what about an ocean? Yeah, ocean, the water has form. It's flat on the top. The bottom is the shape of the ocean bed. So it always has a type of form, always has a shape, but that has nothing to do, it can't eliminate the real nature of water as being formless. So at the same time, that same reality that we say, we may insist that it's formless, we may insist that it has form, but for Sri Ramakrishna, it's both. And the form that it takes is secondary. It's secondary. The primary characteristic is that it's formless and can take any form. So this is how we can say that for the Jnani who insists it's formless, true. For the Bhakta who says that God can take every form, true. Because this is the nature of Brahman, that it can take the shape and it can form. What is the container? Is it the human heart? However we want to see God, God will fill that vessel and take that shape and form for us. So the difference between the Jnani and the Bhakta may say, yes, I understand all of this, but I prefer the form. So we have that beautiful song of Ram Prasad where he says, I don't want to become sugar because I like the taste of sugar. I want to enjoy sugar. So Sri Ramakrishna, that was his attitude, that as much as being merged in Brahman was the highest type of blissful experience, he would say, Mother, give a little sense of separation, give a little sense of ego there so I can enjoy this relationship. So this is what we find when we get to this vijnana state. After the highest type of realization, after getting to the roof, realizing that there's only one, realizing that the individual soul merges in that infinite absolute, like the river going to the ocean, but at the same time coming back down and wanting a relationship, living with some type of ego. And here again, the Jnani will have a certain type of ego. What will be the ego? Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. It's I am Brahman. Devotee will be Dasoham, I am a servant of God, child of God, something like that. So this was really the way that Sri Ramakrishna was able to remove this harsh distinction that used to be there between the two paths. This path of knowledge and the path of devotion, that all will all reach that same ultimate goal. The jnani may say that now I know my true nature. Devotee may say, and now I've reached that state of union with God. But the experience is beyond description. It's beyond description. Either we can say that, yes, I realize God, I realize the self. God alone exists in that state. Brahman alone is real. But the experience will be one and the same. When the river gets into the ocean, then who's there to say, did the river merge with the ocean? Is there no distinction? Is it just one with the ocean? There's no one to say at that point. But the job is done at that point. We've achieved that ultimate reality. So we can start with a devotional attitude. We can start with a dualistic attitude, with a relationship, end up with oneness. Or those who really have that intense longing for self-knowledge, who have that intense renunciation, they can start and be very firm with this idea. Yes, I am that. Swamiji taught that path also. Yeah. You tell yourselves over and over again that I was never born, I'll never die, I'm the self. That fearlessness will come. These are all beautiful attitudes, but we don't have to be exclusively one or the other. Swamiji and Sri Ramakrishna were the two opposite examples of this combination. That we always hear this statement that Sri Ramakrishna was all devotion on the outside and all knowledge on the inside, and Swamiji was all knowledge on the outside, all devotion on the inside. Now, I don't take this to mean that Swamiji was really a bhakta, not a jnani, and Thakur was really a jnani and not a bhakta. I take this to mean that one is not so easily seen from the outside, but they're equally a blend, beautiful blend of both spiritual paths. So I'm going to end now with a quote from the final paragraph of this lecture in Bhakti Yoga. Swamiji says, "We all have to begin as dualists in the religion of love. God to us is a separate being, and we feel ourselves to be separate beings also. Love then comes in the middle, and man begins to approach God, and God also comes nearer and nearer to man. Man takes up all the various relationships of life, as father, as mother, as son, as friend, as master, as lover, and projects them on his ideal of love, on his God. To him, God exists as all these. And the last point of his progress is reached when he feels that he has become absolutely merged in the object of his worship. We all begin with love for ourselves, and the unfair claims of the little self makes even love selfish. At last, however, comes the full blaze of light in which this little self is seen to have become one with the infinite. Man himself is transfigured in the presence of this light of love, and he realizes at last the beautiful and inspiring truth that love, the lover, and the beloved are one." So we'll stop here and we can sit quietly for a few minutes.